we all are created unique and wonderful. And with myself, like Faith, having a disability, I'm on the autism spectrum like all my kids. Don't go in assuming somebody's going to be some way, but just love them where they're at. And we all come in to homeschooling in different places, and so and a lot of times parents with special needs kids are struggling themselves, and so to have that compassion, even more so to listen and be willing to meet them where they're at is so important.
Welcome to Homeschool Talks, a podcast by HSLDA. This is a show about all things homeschooling, from practical tips to inspiring stories and everything in between. This episode of Homeschool Talks features a conversation originally hosted live on our Facebook page. So if you like what you hear, be sure to follow us there for more content like this. We're so glad you've joined us today, and we hope you enjoy the program.
Welcome, everyone. Many of you may know me already. My name is Darren Jones. I'm the Director of Group Services here at HSLDA, and I love serving and supporting homeschool groups in the important work that you all do all across the country. One of the needs that I've seen in the homeschool community is for homeschool groups to be informed and equipped to welcome homeschool families who have children with special needs or maybe parents with special needs into their communities. And so joining me today to talk about that is HSLDA Special Needs Consultant, Faith Berens, and Peggy Ployer from SPED Homeschool. Faith, Peggy, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it a lot.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
Yes.
What I'd like to do to start off as people are coming on is introductions, because I was told that is the proper thing to do when you're first meeting new people. At least that's what Mom says, and I listen to her. All right. So Faith, would you be willing to tell some about yourself, your family, your homeschooling journey, and then some of your role with HSLDA so that people know who you are?
Sure. Well, I'm Faith Berens, like Darren said. First of all, I am a wife. I live in Northern Virginia area, and I have 2 children, and we homeschool. I have a daughter who's graduated. Praise the Lord. We survived homeschooling through high school, and she has some what I like to call hidden disabilities. Challenges, and my son is 12, so I have a tweener, soon to be teen here, and I work part-time for HSLDA as a special needs consultant, and I've been here, it'll be 14 years in August. That's hard for me to believe because it really seems like a blink. And Darren, I did not set out to homeschool. I was a public school teacher and a private school at Christian schools, and I knew I wanted to be a teacher from the time I was a little girl. So homeschooling was not on my radar at all, but it's been a real blessing for our family, and I'm excited to be a part of today's conversation.
Good. Thanks, Faith. Peggy, turning it over to you. Tell us some about yourself, your family, your passion. I think that'll probably come through.
Yeah.
Tell us who you are, Peggy.
All right. Well, my name is Peggy Ployer, and I live in Houston, Texas. And I am married to a wonderful husband of 27 years. And we have 3 children that we've homeschooled all the way through 2 graduated. My 3rd is graduating next month. So I'm done homeschooling, but not done with homeschooling. But our homeschooling journey started because my oldest was diagnosed on the spectrum when he was 5, and he was dealing with severe depression as well, and really no other schooling situation was going to work for him. And so I gritted my teeth and started, and it's been an incredible journey, and it's blessed our family greatly. I started out helping other parents because I was living in Minnesota at that time and started working with MSHE, the Minnesota Association of Christian Home Educators, as their special needs consultant. And then when I moved to Texas, I came on board with the Texas Homeschool Coalition and worked with them. And then in 2017, established SPED Homeschool, which is a nonprofit that reaches worldwide to help parents homeschool students who have unique learning challenges.
Thank you, Peggy.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I will go next. I was homeschooled my last couple years. So unlike both of you, when my wife and I got married, we were actually planning to homeschool. And we are halfway done as far as kids go. We have graduated 2, and we have 2 who are still in high school, middle school. And we've been involved in several different co-ops and support groups through the years. And so that's some of what I'll be talking about during this time. But also because of my work here at HSLDA, I'm dealing with homeschool groups all over the country all the time. And it's fantastic because I get to hear from people who really are trying to help homeschool families in all sorts of circumstances. And I can work with them sometimes to help figure out new ways to do things. And so in this Facebook Live today, what I thought was we could talk about some of these specific ways that groups can help, maybe give some advice to people, some encouragement, whether it's to families or to leaders. So I've got a list of questions that I kind of wanted to go through. And then, of course, as comments come up, we can deal with those as well. But the first one that I had here was, in your experience as serving in a leader in the homeschool community, and both of you have mentioned ways that you've done that, what are some of the types of special needs and disabilities that you have encountered? And so, Peggy, would you be willing to go first on this one and just tell there's a broad range when we talk special needs. Mm-hmm. Some concrete examples. Tell us.
Sure. Well, I've got a list, but I'm going to pull out the top ones that really I have found. Some people even go, "Wow, really?" But of course, autism spectrum. That it's just an increasing amount of, I guess, spectrum disorders, we want to call it. And I guess everywhere from ADHD to what we call typical autism to sensory issues and even into the anxiety and depression, which we don't often address. And it being Mental Health Month, that's something I definitely wanted to bring up. Genetic disorders. A lot of kids, they have medical issues. They have a lot of other things, and homeschooling is a really good fit for these families. And so they choose to homeschool because of these medical conditions and all the other extras that they have to do with their kids to take care of their health. And also kids who are visually or hearing impaired. And so those are a few. I'll defer to Faith for some more.
All right, Faith, how about you? What are some of the ones that you've had experience with?
Sure. Just the gamut, like you said, it's a wide range. Anywhere from gifted students that need more challenging, or maybe they're twice exceptional. So they are gifted in one area, but they may have like dyscalculia or dyslexia. And so, they have that exceptionality as well as their giftedness. Definitely rare genetic and medical issues. More and more families having unique needs because their children have been bullied in public school. So they've come home and they've had trauma. And so that mental health piece that Peggy mentioned and the anxiety, we've seen a huge uptick in that over the past 5 years. Down syndrome, you name it. It's, specific learning disabilities for sure, but it's just the wide gamut, and certainly lots and lots of kiddos on the autism spectrum, like Peggy mentioned.
Okay. So since there is this wide gamut, as both of you said, when families come to you and they want to talk about homeschooling my child who may have this need or that need, what are some of the greatest needs that they are looking to meet. And Faith, I know you're a consultant for HSLDA, so you're talking with parents about this all the time. What is it that they ask you for? What is it that they really need?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one big question is, and this is like a typical one, is like, what curriculum would be best for, the child with? And they're kind of looking for, give me a fix or give me a magic bullet of a curriculum or a program that's going to fix this. And so, of course, curricula consulting is something that we do, and helping a parent put together their individualized home education plan, customizing learning for that student. But if we want to look at big, broad categories, I would say a lot of times parents feel isolated, or they're not finding community or support that they need. There's a lot of, I think, self-doubt or fear, like maybe I can't do this, I'm not equipped to do this, or I can't find somebody that would support homeschooling, that would come alongside me in my journey, either like a therapist or a tutor or something. And then, of course, financial burdens and just exhaustion. So often we're a listening ear, as well as, comfort, encouragement, listening ear, but then also connecting them to find the support that they need. And so I get to do that as my role as a special needs consultant, as well as a homeschooling mom of kids with learning challenges myself. But then I also have the privilege to serve on the board with Peggy with SPED Homeschool. And so I'll kick it over to her too, to what are you hearing? What do you encounter? And then I think it's great that SPED offers support too, and that we can kind of combine their strength in numbers and work together. So we're meeting lots of different needs.
Kind of like doing a Facebook Live together.
Great.
Right. So Peggy, when people go onto SPED's website, there's tons of information there, and then they can talk with you guys. But same question as I asked Faith, what is it that families are looking for so that group leaders can know, what are the needs out there?
Right. Well, sleep, but I don't know how much you can help them on that. That's the number one thing I hear from parents. But respite has been huge, just that help that Faith was talking about. During this time of COVID especially, we've seen a lot of families have lost their help. And so not only are they having to do the things that they used to do, but they're having to do more without the help that they used to have. And so that has been a huge amount of stress that's been added to a lot of these families' lives. And of course, a lot of them hadn't planned on homeschooling, and our situations in the schools have kind of forced their hand in that too, which has always been kind of happened within our community, but we're just seeing a larger amount of families coming in with that. And like Faith was talking about, friendship, community, people that are willing to listen and understand, and not just say, oh, your child has that disability, I get it. You meet one child with autism, you meet one child with autism, you meet one child with one disability, you meet one family that's dealing with disability, you meet one family that's dealing with disability. Each of our situations are different. And just that willingness to say, I will learn, and I'm willing to take the time to develop a relationship, not just to try to fix you or to fix your child. That's so important. And the last thing I would say is a lot of these parents are very concerned about what the future holds for their students, because they don't know. And to be reassured that God has a plan for them and a future and a wonderful path that they can follow, and that He's got it worked out, to just trust in Him. They need that reassurance more so than the typical homeschool family.
Thank you, Peggy. So one of the questions we had submitted before this started was, what are ways, specifically as a group, that you have welcomed or tried to be intentional in welcoming and including families with special needs? I'll talk just a brief one, because we've been involved in a couple co-ops that have done this, and then I'll ask you for your input. We were involved in a co-op for a couple years before COVID that was aimed more at families who came kind of from an unschooling approach. I think our family was the most structured one there. And if you know our family, that's saying something. But it was very much as families, you get together and you can basically do with your child here at this co-op what is most helpful for you and your child. So there was a gym, and a lot of kids would just spend their time playing together in the gym. There were classes that went on. I know because I taught a couple of them, but to a large extent, they were come and go classes. So when I started a class, I would probably have 5 or 6 boys in there and maybe 1 or 2 girls. It was one based on famous battles. But as kids would go by the door and hear interesting things going on or see the paper airplanes flying around as people were reenacting some of the battles, they'd come on in and then maybe they'd leave. And it was a co-op that was really designed for if you have a child who has difficulty sitting still or is not able to work in a classroom environment where you sit at a desk and raise your hand, this is the co-op for you, or at least that's our goal. One other thing that we dealt with both in that co-op and another one was we had several children who had very severe food allergies. And so that was something the co-op took really seriously, to the extent that there were regular emails going out reminding you about activities that were coming up, and then important reminder, don't bring peanuts. Don't bring anything with peanuts. This is the type of co-op that we do. So those are just some of the things that I've experienced personally in trying to be intentionally welcoming. Peggy, can you give leaders some advice on how you make a welcoming co-op?
Yeah, well, you pointed out a couple of things, Darren. First is the seriousness of certain policies, and what you as an organization or group are going to draw the line at. And so if there are food allergies, this is what we have in our policies about that. And communication being very strong. And I think that's a key as well. If you are kind of we'll make this exception for this person, and then you don't communicate it to everybody, that doesn't go over very well long term. And there ends up being a lot of discord. So those are some really important things that to point out, and just your willingness, like I was talking about before, that willingness to come alongside and to learn from. How willing or how flexible is your group to accommodations for a student who may need some accommodations, and finding that out from the family. A lot of times we don't ask because we're afraid that we're going to be stepping on somebody's toes, or that we're going to have to say no. Well, maybe sometimes you are going to have to say no because it's going to stretch you too much or your group too much. But you need to start that conversation before it turns into something that you didn't want it to turn into because you didn't communicate properly. And I think the last thing that I really want to stress is that our groups, if you are looking to really do inclusion right, should look like a good church potluck casserole. And what I mean by that is that there's different ingredients that go into a casserole, and it all makes it taste good. If we want to just have hash browns in our casserole and you want all the children to be the same, that's really not a beautiful picture of God's heavenly design. We've got to, celebrate those mushrooms and those peppers and all those kids that are different, because they add something to the flavor of our group. And if you as a leadership team, and if you as a group and the kids within the group can embrace that is what's going to make it special and unique and just wonderful. So that.
So, Faith, one of the things I'd like you to talk about, if you would, is what has been your experience in working with groups to make them intentionally welcoming? Because I know that's something you've had some experience in.
Yeah, so I've been involved in several co-ops. I helped start a couple. The current one that I'm on and involved in, and I'll be teaching in the fall, one class, we ask on our intake form. So I think being intentional, that piggybacks on what what Peggy said. Sorry, have my friends mixed up there.
That's okay.
I don't know why I must have my friend Carol on my brain. I don't know. Maybe I'm supposed to pray for her today.
Yes.
But, so we put it on our intake form, we do interviews, and we really want to get to know the families, and we really want to try to support them and their needs. And then this past year, we provided a training for the parent teachers on ways that they could accommodate in their group, simple ways, things that they could do for the families, for the children. It could be something as simple as allowing the student to pace or to stand in the back of the classroom or move or have a fidget or bring noise canceling headphones or whatever. So we've provided training, I guess, trying to be proactive from the start, over communicate versus under communicate, and just try to be welcoming like that. Those are some things that we've tried to do. And then I've worked with a couple of state organizations on some trainings or like mini conferences or leadership training on just getting this conversation going, brainstorming, sharing tips and ideas.
So could you talk more about that? Oh, okay.
Well, I wanted to add too, Darren, that I shared a link to a handout that I prepared for groups and state organizations on how to prepare their website better to help that communication. And I don't know if your admin can share that, but that is also helpful. I think that'll
be being put in the chat a little later. Yes, absolutely. Faith, if you wouldn't mind, can you talk a little bit more about your interaction with state organizations? Because I know I've talked with state organizations as well about how to be more welcoming, for example, at conferences with special education and special needs. And I can talk about that more in a little bit. But what has your experience been? How have you been able to help them?
Well, doing Facebook Lives like this, talking to them about having other guests on, maybe doing like one-day events versus the big conference is often really difficult for families impacted by disabilities to attend. So even just brainstorming, could you do a one-day event like a tea or a coffee, pampering time? Peggy mentioned, respite and exhaustion. We've tried to help with networking, how to connect them with speakers and specialists that could come and do events for them or provide resources for their groups, for their organization. Gosh, there's a lot of different things we've talked to. One of my colleagues, Natalie Mack, who is a consultant, but she's also military outreach. We've talked a lot recently about special needs. A couple of her kiddos have some interesting, unique needs too. And so because Natalie has served in the military community and military co-ops, she was talking about how she found marketing to be really, really important. And she just said one easy way is to display photos, families with disabilities, differences, because it's really important for families to see themselves as included and to feel included. So it could be something just as simple as your visuals, Peggy mentioned, website, that lets people know we see you. We're here for you, even if it's just a little simple thing like a graphic or even having a tab. We've talked to organizations about having a special needs section or, unique learners, whatever you want to call it. and listing resources. And so I've been able to provide resource lists to some of the state leaders, and obviously tell them to link to SPED Homeschool and things like that. So those are some ways.
Okay. So one of the things that I've been able to work with in talking with some state homeschool organizations who are looking to become more welcoming is one of the things that actually got me into talking with groups was if you have families who are deaf. If you have a homeschool convention that you're putting on, then make sure you have several sign language interpreters who are available to, for at least, say, the keynote sessions or some of the more popular workshops. Now, that's not something necessarily that a small local group could do, but it's certainly something that the larger ones who are putting on conferences or something could do. One thing also that I found works well with the local groups is they're always looking for volunteers and leaders and teachers to teach classes or to do activities. And I encourage them, find teachers or volunteers who are really passionate about welcoming families who have children with special needs. One of my favorite classes that I ever taught was a class it was actually a middle school Sunday school class. And there were several kids in there who had extreme difficulty sitting still. And I knew several of these kids very, very well. Like I brought them with me to church. But it was a rule in that class that as long as you were quiet, you didn't have to sit. And so I know several people walked by the classroom a couple times, and there were about 12 or 13 middle schoolers in there, some sitting underneath the table, some walking around, some rolling around on the big exercise balls. But they were all listening, engaged. When I would ask them a question about this particular scripture passage that we're talking about, they were right on it because they didn't have to worry about sitting still and not wiggling, and that was the only thing they were focusing on. Now, that was just minor. I don't think there was anyone in there who was blind or had a severe genetic disease or anything. But it was the attitude, I think, of we welcome students. We're not going to make you accommodate our very rigid and strict rules. We're going to accommodate your needs so that you can learn in the way that God made you. So if you're looking for teachers, I think that that's something that can be helpful for groups. What are some specific ways that you have encouraged homeschool parents to find or build community? Yeah, specifically talking about the homeschool community. And Peggy, if you wouldn't mind taking first crack at this one, is there specific advice when parents call and you said they're asking for community? Mm-hmm. So what do you tell them?
Yeah, so it is a unique situation for every family. And that's how I kind of start out the conversation. And I know nowadays pods are like the thing. Well, back in the day, it wasn't called a pod, but it's what I did because I had to have community for my kids. And it's unfortunately, we want to go into a program that's already established, but sometimes the established programs are way too rigid, like you were talking about, Darren, for our kids. And so I just encourage parents to start looking at meetup groups, play groups, that meet up at the park of homeschoolers, and start hunting down other families that you think might be in alignment with yours, or may have those kids on the fringes, and start talking to those moms or dads. There's a lot of dads homeschooling now too. And just see, yes, exactly. Just see who clicks with you and your kids, and they may be your community. And it may not be an established program. Like with my kids, it was me and two other moms, and all of us had kids on the spectrum. And we would just do activities together. Once a week, we set it that this was the day we were going to get together. Sometimes we hired a teacher for a time for a Phi-Ed class, and sometimes it was just activities, or sometimes it was just let's get together and play and have lunch together once a week. But however unique your needs are, you need to find an adaptable situation, and it may change on a yearly basis. Who knows? But to be willing and open to say, I have some responsibility, and I know you're tired, but really the rest does come when you start connecting with community, and it's worth the effort.
Faith, same question for you. What advice can you give parents who say, I need community?
Yeah, I mean, I've done what Peggy's done. I have a good friend. I think she's actually on here, and she's part of our co-op. Shelly, shout out to Shelly. We did pod, home learning groups, whatever you want to call it, when our kids were younger. Both of us, our older daughters had processing issues. It wasn't going to be a good fit somewhere else. So we've done that. We've, outsourced finding other teachers to bring in, like Darren said, but finding community. There's online community that's not as great as having, face-to-face, somebody I can sit across the table with and cry or pray or share a meal, and our kids can get together. But, there are online communities, groups. You can find support too through SPED Homeschool, our tribes. But maybe tapping into other groups, like there's Johnny and Friends has a listing of disability ministries. So I'll often talk to parents and friends who are homeschooling that have kiddos with special needs, like maybe tapping into a Johnny and Friends ministry group where their kids could find mentoring and employability skills training, camps, things like that. So we have to get creative and think outside the box. There's other groups like Circle Maker has a mentoring program. But yeah, community is definitely a necessity, and just much needed for our own mental health and survival. And God created us that way. He didn't mean for us to walk this journey of life alone. So, and I think that's just part of I know it's part of my heart, and I know it's part of Peggy's, and Darren, I'm sure yours too, as a dad, and the work that you do is to help people find those connections. We need one another.
We do. One of the ways that HSLDA is trying to help people with that is on our website, hslda.org. We actually have a section where you can find a group. Conveniently, it's located underneath the community tab on our website. And if you run a group, we would love to have you listed there if you aren't. And one of the tags that we ask you to check is, do you provide support for special needs homeschoolers? And so when you go in to search by it, besides just putting in your zip code and finding out what's in your area, you can also search for groups that offer special needs services. I would like to take some time to answer some of the questions that have come up. I've seen a couple here. So there's a Facebook user who says, I've been using PACES, but my ADHD son and daughter on the spectrum have a rough time with math. Maybe I need to change curriculum. Faith, I'm going to throw that one to you if you don't mind. Is this something that the consultants can help with?
Absolutely. So parents can call us, email us. We can do a personalized phone consultation, find out your kids' strengths as well as their weaknesses to maybe help you find a customized math. But I'll throw out a couple that I like. For kids that like online learning, computer, CTC math, I really like Right Start Math. It's very multisensory. It's geared for kids who are struggling. It helps them with conceptualization of math. Of course, Math UC is great by Steve Demme. But another one that a lot of families may not know about is Ronnie Bird. It's RONIT, RonitBird.com. And she is a math specialist, a dyscalculia specialist. And everything she does uses games, dominoes, cards, popsicle sticks, all kinds of fun stuff you probably have at home or you can get your hands on. And she has little activity books. It's teaching math and math conceptualization for kids who have struggles with math or dyscalculia. I love her resources.
All right. And someone else had asked, do you have to be a member to get guidance from our consultants? For personalized, yes, you do have to be a member. Please feel free to join. Peggy, somebody put in the questions SPED, what is SPED? And we put in the official description of what SPED is. Now, limiting yourself to just a few minutes, tell us, what is SPED Homeschool, Peggy?
So SPED Homeschool is an abbreviation for Special Education Homeschool. And our goal is just to empower families to educate different learners, but from the basis of parents who have already done that. So our entire team and our board of directors have homeschooled their own students with differing needs. So we understand what it means to homeschool versus just throwing out a bunch of resources for you and saying, well, this seems like it's a good idea. It might work. And so just know that every organization that's on our website, I actually personally interview and vet and know that they have a heart for helping you. A lot of our curriculum providers even say, I want parents to call me. I want them to ask me questions, and just know that they want you to do that. But we also list therapists and consultants and other things if parents need even more help than just an HSLDA consultant. Some of them need really write everything out for me. I need somebody who's there all the time for me. And that's what these consultants do. So we're a nonprofit. We don't charge. Everything is free. And so we even tell state organizations, put our resources on our website. Ask if you can copy our blogs. They are written by our partners. And just get the information out. That's what we're there for. It was a resource I didn't have when I started homeschooling 19 years ago. And that's the passion behind what I do.
It's amazing how much the homeschool world has taken off just even the last 20 years. It's amazing to me. All right. Someone asking for Nevada, and Peggy, if you wouldn't mind here, methods for effectively teaching someone with dyslexia. Are you going to have information on that on SPED website? Can you give them a good idea of place to go there?
Well, we did a whole month on dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia, and Faith has a really good article on our website. But we also focus that I do a weekly live broadcast too, and so we focus on those topics, those monthly topics as well. So if you check out the SPED Homeschool YouTube channel and look at dyslexia, you're going to find a lot of resources there. We have the full 1 hour videos, but then we also, my video editing team takes 3 to 5 minute chunks, 4 of those from each of those hours to kind of give you little snippets, because we know the attention span of our readers is about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes. And so we know that you want to get that information. And we also turn it into a podcast. So a lot of parents say, well, I just plug you in my ear. So we have a podcast on dyslexia, actually quite a few. So that might be a help as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
One for both of you here. Suggestions for parents whose kids have reading or math disabilities and anxiety issues that want to go to college. I'll start. Faith, do we have any information that would be useful to parents wanting to send kids to college and kids who want to go to college but are going to need some extra support?
Absolutely, yeah. We have actually in our court report, so if you go to HSLDA's website, you can find the archive issues of the court report. But one of the latest ones, there's an article there written by myself and my colleague, Dr. Rochelle Somerville, on setting sail for college and navigating, college for students with different abilities. It's an area of passion for me because I was told, don't bother going to college, you'll never make it, because of my own learning disability. And so that's a topic that I love to help parents navigate. College kids can absolutely go to college. There are colleges specific for students with intellectual disabilities, Down syndrome. Every college, if they get public funding, has a special student services department. So kiddos can go there and ask for accommodations, get an accommodation letter or a form. Do not rule college out. Your kids can do college. They can get there. It may take an alternative path. It may take longer. High school may take longer. Maybe they can't carry a full load. They can absolutely go to college and be very successful. They just may need extra time, and they're going to need to use assistive technology, and they're going to need accommodations, but they can do it. And I would love to help families navigate that.
Good. One of the things we found for my son, who has severe anxiety, is it was kind of the luck of the draw or God's hand, whichever one you want to say. He got a very good academic advisor his first semester in college, and she was able to give him excellent advice about take these classes, these ones you might want to avoid. How about if you wait on this one? Do this one right now because you'll need it for later on. And she was really able to give him very specific advice. And that's what really helped him, because he was worried about, this cloud of unknown stuff. And when she was able to break it down, she was awesome that way. It was a real big help. Peggy, college.
So, you guys were both talking about the advisors and the extra help that colleges provide. Those disability service centers are a wealth of information, and you can access those before your student goes to college. So just know that if you are concerned with anything, and this is the college they want to go to, make an appointment, meet with them, and say, this is where we're at. This is what is your advice? And there may be classes, if they're not at grade level, there may be classes that they can take previous to that, after they graduate, to help them get to that level where they would get accreditation. They're willing to work around a lot of things. Also know that your student can apply for those services and not use them until they are necessary. So they can be sitting in place. The professors won't even know that your student has this diagnosis until they disclose it to that professor. So it's something that if you want to have as kind of a backup plan and your student doesn't want to disclose right away, that's another way to handle it too. So you can either go upfront way ahead of time or just hold back and use it when you can. My oldest chose not to disclose and not to even get re-diagnosed. And that was his choice. So a lot of times when he had to start advocating for himself in college, we had a long discussion about that choice and how he was going to navigate around that. And again, this is your child's life too. And to help them to gain that that ability to advocate for themselves as an adult is really important. And so this is part of the learning process as well.
I'll take the next question. Does the Americans with Disabilities Act apply to a local homeschool support group, and what would that imply for the leadership? And I'm going to be a very good lawyer and say that depends. Because yes, there are absolutely times when the Americans with Disabilities Act could apply to a homeschool group. For example, if it is putting on a homeschool conference that's open to anyone, that may be classified as a public accommodation. If it is meeting at a library, which is subject to ADA, part of your contract for using the library room might be that you're going to have to make accommodations under the ADA. If you're maybe putting on some sort of curriculum fair, throwing your doors open to the general public, that might be classified as a public accommodation. However, as a general rule, if you're just a private group meeting together, the Americans with Disabilities Act is probably not going to apply, either because you're a social club or because you are a church or other religious organization. And if you have a question about this as a group leader, I'll be happy to talk with you about that. That being said, you can probably tell I'm going to push you toward, even if it's not your legal duty, you want to welcome people to the extent that your group feels that it can. And I advocate for that. I think it's good for groups to do that. But as I always tell groups, figure out what kind of group you want to be and then be that group. All right, moving on. Someone asked about insurance needs. Please contact me, groupservices@hslda.org, because that is an important thing, but I don't want to take a lot of time on it this time here. All right, and so let's end here, I think, with what are the primary things a co-op should be doing to be considered a co-op that supports special needs children. Peggy, how about if you go first, and then Faith? What are the primary things a co-op should be doing?
They should just be open, willing to have the conversation. If they say that they're open to accepting families who have challenges with disabilities or homeschooling amidst disabilities, that they're just willing to enter that conversation and say, yeah, how can we help? And the go back and forth. It doesn't mean that you're going to change your entire program because the family needs this or they're demanding this. Some families with special needs can be very demanding because they're used to fighting the school system. And so you have to stand your ground as to what your group was, how you were created, originated, what you stand on as well. But if you're open and willing to learn and to help this family, you need to have a listening ear and a compassionate one that just says, well, tell us what you need, and let's pray through this and see what we can do.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
Faith.
Yeah, I think that's really just key, is being welcoming, honoring. I mean, people with disabilities, special needs, different abilities, whatever we want to say. We just want to be included, and we want to be heard and welcomed, and we want to have the same opportunities that everybody else has. Speaking from my own personal perspective, and we want that for our children. I would say, here's an idea, even just in our literature that we pick at co-op, read some books or include maybe in your literature class or your book discussions, neurodiverse people. There's some really great children's picture books. Maybe your co-op, maybe you want to have once a month, highlight a family or a student, get to know, and the student could, or the family could even share about, this is who I am as a person. These are my challenges and my strengths. And, maybe you don't know anything about dyslexia. Let me tell you about that, what it's like to be a 12-year-old kid with dyslexic. Now, will all of our students want to do that or feel comfortable? No, but to even have the opportunity to have the conversations, to just feel welcome and included. Those are just some of my thoughts off the top of my head.
Thank you. I sometimes tell group leaders that, to some extent, my advice to them is exactly what every marriage counselor talks about. It's communication. As Peggy said, you've got to have that listening, compassionate ear. And as Faith said, you've got to have that conversation. So thank you very much for joining me today, Peggy and Faith. I appreciate it a lot. For those watching today, please look at the comments. We've linked to a number of different things, including some of HSLDA's resources and SPED Homeschool. Also, important here, SPED Homeschool is hosting a retreat for families with special needs this summer. It's going to be a great opportunity for each family member to have some fun and rest and be encouraged. And that link also will be in the comments. That's being held up in Minnesota. And I actually just got an email about it yesterday because I'm on the email list for the Minnesota homeschool group. So thanks for putting that on.
Yes.
Michelle is working with SPED on that, and I am so thrilled to see that.
Mm-hmm.
If you are a group leader watching, you might already be aware that HSLDA has a group services department. I'm the director of group services. We answer questions about membership policies, Americans with Disabilities Act, whether to get insurance and where from, how to draft child protection statements, all sorts of those fun things. So reach out to me at groupservices@hslda.org because we would love to connect with you and see what HSLDA can do to help you. Also, as a reminder, if you would like your group listed in our group search tool, please let us know. Peggy and Faith, I will leave it with you. Peggy, any final words of encouragement? And then Faith, and then we'll end. Peggy?
I just want to encourage everybody. We all are created unique and wonderful. And with myself, like Faith, having a disability, I'm on the autism spectrum like all my kids. Don't go in assuming somebody's going to be some way, but just love them where they're at. And we all come in to homeschooling in different places, and so and a lot of times parents with special needs kids are struggling themselves, and so to have that compassion, even more so to listen and be willing to meet them where they're at is so important. But we love you groups and state organizations because you're out there in the trenches with our families, and you make it possible for homeschooling to happen in your states and local areas. So thank you for all that you do. And thank you, HSLDA, for hosting this, as well as your continued efforts to fight for our freedom.
Our pleasure. Mm-hmm. Faith?
Amen, sister, to everything you said. I would encourage people, just pray and ask God for God's wisdom and direction. He is so faithful. He gives us what we need when we need it, and opens doors and opportunities. And I just continue to reach out, have an open heart, those listening ears, and just thank you for the work that you all do. As homeschooling parents, as leaders in your own community, be in the hands and feet of Jesus and loving the least of these, and just keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. And thank you to those of you who have joined us for this Facebook Live. We appreciate it, and I hope you have a great day.
Every week, we hear from hundreds of homeschool families, many of whom are facing hostility from school officials or discrimination from colleges and employers. We've helped single parents facing criminal charges for homeschooling their children. We've helped families traumatized by wrongful CPS investigations. And we've even helped a grandmother harassed by the state for homeschooling her granddaughter. By donating to HSLDA, you can help make homeschooling possible for families like these and enable our work to preserve freedom for future generations. Give today at hslda.org/donate. That's hslda.org/donate. Thanks for listening to this episode of Homeschool Talks. If you enjoyed this conversation, leave a review to let us know what you think. To hear more conversations like this one, be sure to subscribe to this podcast or head on over to hslda.org/podcast for more inspiring stories and awesome ideas about homeschooling. That's all for today. We hope you enjoyed the program, and we'll see you next time.